Welcome back to day 5 of our questions with Kirsty. And today's question is this.
What needs to happen between winning the referendum and Independence Day? Because there'll be some years between winning and then actually becoming independent.
There's also a little matter of recovering from our hangover.
Oh, yes, that's true.
If you think about Brexit, there were actually 2 negotiations. First of all, there was a withdrawal agreement, and that dealt with the rights of EU citizens and British citizens in the EU. With money and with Northern Ireland. And then a year later, there was a trade deal. So you could, with the UK, you could imagine having a kind of twin track. So you negotiate the divorce settlement, but you also negotiate the trade basis for trade agreement for day 1 of independence. I think you're going to have to bring the EU into that because of the trade and cooperation agreement. So the trade and because of the withdrawal agreement. So at the moment, Scotland protects the rights of EU citizens already living in Scotland under that agreement, and it's done it with much more constructive positivity, obviously, than the Boris Johnson government did. But it's going to have to recommit to that. There'll be a dividing line in between Scottish and English or rest of UK waters and fish and issues like that. So although normally what I would say to you is, well, the EU won't negotiate anything with Scotland until it's a state, actually there's going to have to be some sort of interesting three-way talk between UK, Scotland and EU about, well, what happens to the trade and cooperation agreement? Do we need to amend it? How is it going to change? And to my mind, the conclusion I've come to on that is that actually what you want is a transition period that maybe for the first year or longer, but at least for a year, you might keep Scotland in that trade and cooperation agreement. So there would be an open border between Scotland and England, and there would be the same border between Scotland and the EU as there is now for that year, but the difference being that Scotland is then an independent state. It can negotiate the association agreement with the EU, and it can consider the implications of what sort of trade deal it needs on a temporary basis with the UK, given that association agreement. I say temporary because, of course, if you go, if 3 years later or 4 years later you're in the EU, then the trade agreement is the EU one. And so to go back to your EFTA question, it's a bit of a long way around, but to go back to it, that's why I was saying it's a choice. So if you want to go and join the European Economic Area, to do that, you first of all do need to join EFTA, and then you can ask to join the European Economic Area. And point to note, all the EU member states are in the European Economic Area. So you're going to have to get agreement of all of them, and you're going to have to show that you meet all the single market criteria, just as you would in accession talks with the EU. So I think the idea that you could do that on day 1 or even within a couple of months, I think is misconceived. But more to the point, perhaps, there's 2 routes. If you want to join the EU, you tell that to Brussels pretty quickly, because there's no reason why you want this to take 6 years when it could take 4 or something. And then you agree as fast as possible the association agreement, depending on if you're having a transition being part of the UK-EU deal. Or you say, no, well, we still maybe want this transition period with the UK-EU deal, but then we're going to join EFTA EEA. So they're alternatives. One is not the route to the other.
Yes, right. Well, on the one hand, it sounds like such a lot of work and such a lot of detail to think through. But on the other hand, I'm also getting the impression, well, there's a definite pathway. Obviously, there's a definite pathway into the EU.
So that was a really helpful summary, wasn't it, from Kirsty, about all the different trade deals that we're in and the permutations as they change as we move from the UK back into the EU and the process of that happening.